Guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are staying safe. Hope everything's good wherever you are. Guys, so it looks like Amir Khan's gonna call retirement on his career. It looks like he's going to hang the gloves up. And rightfully so after what we saw on Saturday night. I think it's quite clear to see that he's not anywhere near what he once was. It was at times quite sad to watch that he had no legs under him. He couldn't explode in and out like he used to in his prime. I felt like he used to move so effortlessly, whereas now he was kind of struggling to move really inside that ring. It didn't look good. It didn't look right. Um, and it was what it was. It was just a really off color Amir Khan, and you could clearly see that he had diminished massively as a fighter. Um, and it was quite easy pickings for Brook. Brook won quite easy. It's quite easy for him. It wasn't a tough fight. And let's be honest, in his prime, he wasn't an easy fight for anybody. Um, but yeah, it was a sad way to see him go out like that. I don't think he's gonna I don't think he's gonna fight again. I think, look, we don't know what he's gonna do, but he's most likely from the press conference after, the interviews after, it looks like he's quite firm. I think even if he had won, I think he probably would have retired. I think he would have retired. I don't think he had any intention of fighting on. To be brutally honest with you, I think months before the fight, I think he was kind of hinting that I'm done, even if I win. But I think obviously the performance was quite poor, like poor in the sense that compared to what we normally see with Amir Khan, it was totally, it wasn't him. It wasn't him. It was a guy that was totally spent. So yeah, I think the writing, the time, I think you probably hear in a couple of weeks' time, maybe put out a statement letting everybody know that he won't fight again. But it's been a great career. It's been a great career, and he's given us some great memories. Um, I feel like at times we never really got to see Prime Khan enough. It's a bit like, for example, Canelo. For example, look how many times he fights. I felt like Amir Khan had too many stop starts in his career, especially after Canelo. Like, I think after when he got beat by Canelo, I feel that was him done. If I'm totally honest with you, at world level, I don't think he was ever the same fighter. But if we go through his career, he had his troubles early on in his career. He got dropped by Willie Limond, Michael Gomez, and then eventually got stopped by Brady Prescott. Then obviously I think there was a pivotal move in his career where he went to America and joined Freddie Roach. And I feel like he came back very strong. He beat O'Sheen Fagan. He beat Barrera, who was a former shadow of himself. Then fought Andre Kotelnik and beat Kotelnik in very emphatic fashion, beat him quite comfortably. Kotelnik was a good fighter. I think Kotelnik's only lost a couple fights. He beat Maidana Kotelnik, and Amir Khan totally outclassed him. Then he fought. Then he, then he had his Salita fight, I believe, and then obviously he went over to America and fought Paulie Malignaggi. Totally outclassed Paulie Malignaggi. Um, he fought Marcus Maidana in one of the best fights. One of the best fights I've seen. In terms of, like, it was all action packed, going back and forth, getting hurt in that fight. Having Maidana almost stopped in the first round. Um, that was just an epic fight, and he managed to come through and win that fight. Then he fought. I think he came back to the UK and fought Paul McCluskey. Beat Paul McCluskey. Then he fought. I think he went back to America, and did he then fight Lamont Peterson? These are his big fights anyway. Against Lamont Peterson, he went back, and I personally thought he won that fight, and he was harshly done in that fight. He should have won that fight. Um, should have got the decision. And then, he was supposed to rematch Lamont Peterson. There was all this kerfuffle after the fight. There was all this back and forth about the judges, about the man in the hat, if you guys remember that controversy. And then he was all set to rematch Lamont Peterson, which was kind of crazy because, you know what, Amir Khan never rematched Brady Prescott, which I was quite surprised. I thought somewhere down the line he would rematch Prescott because Prescott really fell away. But he decided to rematch Lamont Peterson. And Lamont Peterson ended up failing a drugs test. Lamont Peterson ended up failing a drugs test, and Amir Khan, basically they've scheduled another fight for him against Danny Garcia. At the time, Danny Garcia was a very unknown quantity, and Amir Khan was a massive favorite going into that fight. He fought Angel Garcia, did a great job getting into Amir's head, and Amir Khan, for me, fought a very reckless fight in that fight. I actually thought he kind of threw that fight away. He fought a very poor fight. I think he was trading. He was just, for me, he was just having a war with Danny Garcia. He never boxed smart in that fight, and he ended up getting caught with a left hook on the neck, and he kind of never recovered from that. He was all over the place. He took a lot of shots in that fight. By the way, I must say that the Danny Garcia, Lamont Peterson, and Maidana fight were brutal. Those are the type of fights that take a lot out of you. So then he lost to Danny Garcia, and then he left Freddie Roach, and joined Virgil Hunter, who was the coach of Andre Ward at the time, and Virgil Hunter was known as a very good defensive coach. And I felt like Virgil Hunter managed to mold Amir Khan into a very good fighter. Now, I think his first fight after the Danny Garcia loss was Carlos Molina. He fought Carlos Molina, beat him quite comfortably. I think he even stopped him, but yeah. And then he after that fought Julio Diaz, I believe. Did he fight Julio Diaz? Yeah, I think he fought Julio Diaz, and he actually got dropped in that fight. He didn't look too good. Julio Diaz was coming off a good win against, a draw against Sean Porter. So obviously he was a top fighter, Diaz. And then, after that, after he beat Julio Diaz, I believe he then fought Collazo, was it? I think he fought Collazo. And then, he put in a great performance against Louis Collazo. Totally outclassed Louis Collazo, beat him up. And a lot of people at the time thought Collazo would beat him. They just thought the pressure of Collazo would be too much for Amir Khan. And Collazo was coming off a good knockout victory against Victor Ortiz. So a lot of people were thinking that, you know what, Collazo might do the business here. But, Amir Khan put in, for me, a very, very good performance. Then he fought Alexander. And it was sad because Khan should have fought Alexander for the IBF Welterweight Championship. And he was supposed to fight Alexander in 2012 in December. But apparently he thought he was getting the Mayweather fight. So I think Mayweather and his team probably told him that he might get the fight. So he ended up pulling out of that fight because he thought he was going to get the Mayweather fight, which is probably the biggest mistake of his career, because he would have become a welterweight world champion, which actually would have probably put him in a better position to get the Mayweather fight. But Amir Khan made a huge mistake, and he ended up losing that fight. Alexander fought Sean Porter and got beat by Sean Porter. Khan then fought Alexander 4 or 5 months later and totally outclassed Alexander in one of his best performances. And I thought it was a punch-perfect performance under Virgil Hunter. A brilliant performance. One of the best, you could say, from a British fighter. It was an unbelievable performance. It was just totally outclassed Alexander. I don't think anyone beat Alexander like that. If you go and look at the Porter fight, that was a very competitive fight. I think Porter beat him 115, 113. It was a very close fight, and Khan totally dominated Alexander. I think that was probably the best Khan we ever saw. It was an unbelievable performance. Unfortunately, after this, the Mayweather fights didn't happen, the Pacquiao fights didn't happen, and I think Amir Khan lost motivation. I think he lost dedication. And I don't think after that his career became more... I don't think he was dedicated as he was early on in his career. And it showed when he took on... I think he was out the ring for a year, and he took on Chris Algieri, and that was the time after Alexander where he should have fought Kell Brook. When the what do you call it, the Mayweather fight didn't happen, he should have fought Kell Brook, and that was the time to make that fight. Where he was in his prime, Brook was in his prime, and that was the time to make the Kell Brook fight when Kell Brook beat Sean Porter. But unfortunately, Khan didn't fight him. He went on to fight Chris Algieri, and Chris Algieri, he looked poor in that fight. If I'm going to be honest with you, he didn't look too good. He didn't look too good in that fight. I don't think he was training in between camps like he was. I think when he fought Collazo and Alexander, I think he had back-to-back camps. And as they say, iron sharpens iron. When you're living the life as a boxer, you're gonna be a top fighter. You're gonna, especially with the talents that he had. Unfortunately for me, after that, he fought Chris Algieri. I don't think he was prepared that well, and he didn't look too good. He won the fight, but he didn't look too good. He even got rocked a couple of times in the fight. And then, he kind of frustration. Then they went into negotiations with for the Brook fight. There was a lot of talk. And then, Amir Khan shocked the boxing world when he decided to take on pound for pound king, Saul Canelo Alvarez. And obviously he was moving up weight to fight Canelo Alvarez. And he did well for a couple of rounds. Canelo kind of sussed him out, slowing him down, and then brutally knocked him out. And for me, that was the end of Amir Khan as a world-class fighter. That was the end of Amir Khan at world level. He was no longer a world level fighter. And obviously then he had 2 years out. Obviously after being brutally knocked out like that, that was a severe knockout. He was knocked out badly in that fight. And looking back at hindsight, hindsight's a wonderful thing, because Amir Khan was only a young guy. He was only 29 when he fought Canelo. And even with 2 years out the ring, Amir Khan was when he finally decided to come back in the ring, he was 31. But I think that inactivity and getting brutally knocked out to Canelo Alvarez I think that ended his career. And he then came back and signed with Eddie Hearn, and everybody thought the Brook fight was going to be inevitable. He fought Phil LaGreco, and he knocked Phil LaGreco out in one round. But the warning signs were there in the Phil LaGreco fight. If you look at the way Khan moved in that fight as well against Phil LaGreco, he caught LaGreco. But he didn't, for me, the way he moved in that fight, and now looking back at hindsight, look, at the time, it was a great knockout. But if you go back and watch that fight, his legs and feet had slowed down massively. Because if you look at the way he knocked LaGreco out, looking back in hindsight after what we saw after that, he was kind of reaching and lunging. And I felt like his legs after the Canelo fight were never the same. And this got made more transparent when he took on Samuel Vargas, I believe, a couple of months later. He fought Sammy Vargas, and Sammy Vargas gave him a life and death fight. He ended up dropping Amir Khan, and he was badly hurt. He was on wobbly legs in the middle of that fight as well. You could clearly see that Amir Khan was totally a faded fighter. And I personally think that Amir Khan at that point I think Frank Warren said after the Vargas fight that he should retire. I think that was the warning sign that he should have retired, because I don't think he was the fighter. Because in his prime, he would have battered Vargas and taken Vargas out. Paulie Malignaggi said that he felt that Khan was, he was struggling to move in there. Paulie Malignaggi said that when Khan was in his prime, he was gliding effortlessly, but he was struggling to move in that fight. And he ended up getting knocked down, and Paulie Malignaggi realized that, okay, this is a complete pastic version of Amir Khan. Then another shot came where there was negotiations about the Brook fight, and then he ended up going down the Crawford route. ended up fighting Terence Crawford, and what everyone feared and what we saw in the Vargas fight, it was clearly shown in the Crawford fight, where he had nothing left. His feet were horrible. His feet were all over the place, and Crawford was very dominant in that fight and beat Amir Khan quite convincingly. Many people thought, Amir Khan didn't want any more and he decided to quit in that fight. I think that was the writing on the wall in terms of Amir Khan should have probably called it a day there. And then he fought Billy Dib, I think 6 months or 4 months later. He was meant to fight Niraj Goya. But again, I actually thought he didn't look that good in that fight. I thought he was, again, his feet didn't look that great, but he was fighting a guy who was very undersized. And Amir Khan did a job on him, beat him easy. But again, I think he didn't look that great in that fight. I think ever since the Canelo fight, even though he knocked Phil Greco out in a round, I don't think his legs were ever firm and stable. And that was proven in the Crawford fight and the Vargas fight. And then, and even in the Dib fight, I don't think he looked convincing to me. And then obviously he went on another hiatus. Obviously COVID hit and he was out for a very long time. And then finally this Kell Brook fight was announced. A long-awaited rivalry, a long-awaited showdown, which, everyone wanted to see. And it was clearly a shadow of himself, Amir Khan, against Kell Brook. And he ended up getting beat a lot worse. He was also out the ring from Billy Dib fight. He was out the ring for almost 2.5 years, So the inactivity in his career really hurt him there. But the point is, when he took on the Kell Brook fight, he wasn't going to take a tune-up fight. He had got past that point in his career where it was about coming back and rebuilding and seeing what he had left. Because if he had taken a tune-up fight, who knows? He may have even lost that tune-up fight. He was that far gone that he may have even lost the tune-up fight. He may have even lost the tune-up fight because that's how bad he looked when he fought Kell Brook. He may have even lost a tune-up fight. So I think Amir Khan's had a great career. He's inspired a load of people. What he did as an Olympian, at the 17-year-old, he's entertained me and many people like me. He's been, like I said, one of the great British fighters. I don't think he gets the credit, in his prime, I think he was an exceptional talent. I just feel like bad decision-making, poor career moves at times cost him. I think he should have had a much better legacy. I think there was at times where, certain fighters ducked him. I don't want to say Mayweather and Pacquiao ducked him because they were legends and all-time greats, but I think Timothy Bradley blatantly ducked him. And I think he kind of robbed Amir Khan of his glory moment because both these guys were unified champions. If Khan had beaten Tim Bradley, he would have become an undisputed champion. And that would have stayed with him for the rest of his life. I don't really think he got a top win at welterweight. And I think that really hurts his legacy because he did well at 140 pounds and he was a great fighter at 140 pounds. But at 147 pounds, he didn't really beat anyone of at top level. Like, he should have fought Keith Thurman, Kell Brook back when he was in his prime. And unfortunately, because he was chasing Mayweather and Pacquiao, he knew that these fighters were risks and he didn't want to risk it. But really, I think in his prime he would have had a good chance in all of those fights. Not saying he would have won all of them, but he would have had a good chance. And unfortunately, he didn't take that risk because he was chasing Mayweather and Pacquiao, that he knew that these other guys were risks. And if I lose to them, that's Mayweather and Pacquiao fight's gone. So yeah, I feel like he hurt his legacy a little bit with some of the career moves. But nevertheless, it's been an unbelievable career, a long career. And like I said, he's fought 16 former world champions, beat 11, which is, again, exceptional. I believe he's had 10 world title fights. 10 world title fights, which is incredible when you think about it. That's amazing. I think, did he lose? Did he lose 4 of them? Won 6? I think he won 6 and lost 4 of them. And really, it should be 7 because I think in my opinion, he beat Lamont Peterson. Um, and bearing in mind, like one of them was going up against Canelo, and one of like two for me. One of them was when he was washed up against Crawford, and Canelo was a guy that was too heavy, too big, and I thought he beat Lamont Peterson. So when you think back at it, right, he shouldn't have ever fought Canelo. I think he probably shouldn't have fought Crawford because he was past his best. And I don't really think he had a chance going into that fight against Crawford just because of where he was at in his career. But nonetheless, you have to say it's been one roller coaster ride. And listen, we're not going to see Amir Khan again. I don't think. That's just my opinion in a ring, unless he's like doing some exhibitions. And I think we sometimes he doesn't seem to get the credit because people think that he's got 6 losses and he's lost, but I think some of those losses could have been avoided. I think some of the moves and some of the career decisions he made were pretty poor, hence why he ended up losing some fights. But I feel like Amir Khan was a great fighter. um I don't know how he'll be remembered. I don't know. Like he definitely helped transcended British boxing just because of what he did as an Olympian. Then he, so young, world champion, beat so many good fighters. I just feel like, he for me inspired a new generation. Now you see a lot of British Asian fighters coming through, and that's all because of him. So he definitely, as Barry Jones said in an interview, that Amir Khan helped transcend British boxing, and he'll always be one of the big names like your Nigel Benn, Eubank, Khan, Joshua, the Furies, the Calzagis. You know, he'll always be held in high regard in that sense from a name point of view because he did help transcend. I just feel like his career could have been a lot better. I feel like his legacy could have been far greater if some career moves, if the career moves were a bit more smart, to be honest. Um, but nonetheless, you only have one career. He did everything. As he said, he went above and beyond what he ever thought he would achieve. Look, he fought in America, fought in the biggest arenas in America, had his name lit up in like Vegas. Fought big fights here in the UK. He had everything. He's had a great career. Win or lose. He's lost some fights. But when you fight as many top fighters as he has, you're gonna lose. There's not many British fighters that really fight as many good fighters as Amir Khan has fought throughout his career. Very rarely. Like I said, 16 former world champions. How many British fighters do you know that fought 16 former world champions? It's very hard. Very, very a long. And by the way, he's had quite an inactive career as well. Like it's a career where it's been a lot stop-start. So you think about how, if he wasn't inactive, especially after the Alexander fight, how many more fights he could have got in. And if he didn't take the Canelo fight and took a Danny Garcia or a Brook fight, it would have been interesting to see how long his career would have been, or how many more top fights he could have had, or world title fights. Because after 2011, Amir Khan, if I'm not mistaken, only had 2 world title fights, and they were against Canelo and Crawford. So Amir Khan, after losing to Danny Garcia, didn't get another world title fight, even though he had opportunities. Like I said, he had the Alexander fight, which was scheduled and he pulled out of. Amir Khan didn't have a world title fight after Danny Garcia until Canelo Alvarez in 2016, I believe, or 2015-16. Then his next world title fight came 3 years later against Terence Crawford. So he's only had, after 2011, he's only had 2 world title fights. Crazy. Crazy, man. Absolute crazy. But yeah, he's had a great career. I wish him all the best. He helped get me into the sport. He helped get many people into the sport. And I think he's had a great and tremendous career. And I think it's time now to rest up and enjoy his career. But yeah, leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I missed something. Maybe when he does announce it, I'll do a career review properly with his box rec and maybe get somebody else on, and then we'll talk about his career. But yeah, it's been a phenomenal career. It's been one that, like I said, he should be proud of. What he did as an amateur and pro is unparalleled. Like I said, very few British fighters achieved the heights that he did. So yeah, fair play to him. Great career, and wish him all the best in retirement if he does decide to retire. But yeah, leave your thoughts, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.